Welcome, everyone, back to this powerful episode. I'm so excited to introduce you to someone who has a very special place in my heart because she interviewed me quite a while back. And the conversations were so good. The questions were so thoughtful and insightful. And I got the intuitive nudge to reach out. We've kind of been keeping in touch over time. And I said, would you be a guest on my podcast? And she said, yes. And here we are. So, Camille is a podcast host and life coach who created Fulfilled to inspire others to step into their full potential and live lives that feel aligned and intentional. After spending years going through the motions in a corporate finance career, she decided to take charge of her life and create a path she truly loves. Now she's passionate about helping others do the same, gaining clarity, breaking limiting beliefs, and building a fulfilling life on your own terms. Welcome.
Emily, thank you so much for that beautiful intro and for having me today. I'm looking forward to
Absolutely.
chatting with you.
Me too. So it's funny because the first thing that's coming to mind before we jumped into this episode, we just caught up for a few minutes
Mhm.
and you shared that you had moved from New York and you're now in Austin. It's just a very different experience for you. So, how did you initially get the nudge or the feel that it was time for you to leave New York?
Mm, I gave a lot of thought to the life I wanted to be living,
Hmm.
and it kind of just got to a point where my environment in New York wasn't really a great vehicle for that anymore. I'm
Hmm.
very into wellness. I wanted to be in warm weather. I felt like I didn't have necessarily like such a close community in New York. It takes a while to really like find people there. It's such a big and overpowering city that I just felt like there wasn't much keeping me there anymore. And I just got very real about the fact that, like, in terms of the life I want to be living, the things I want to be prioritizing, it just wasn't necessarily the space for that anymore. And when I recognized that truth, it was hard to unsee. And I just started to feel more and more that it was time for a move. It's like I'm sure you talk about this a lot in your episodes, but it's like when you get that intuitive nudge and you like allow it to come up, often it just gets stronger and stronger. And so there was more and more reasons why it felt right to make a change.
Well, that's very courageous because I know that just even listening to our intuition and giving it space to breathe and tell us the things that it's like we want to hear, but we also don't want to hear it. I always say this path takes a lot of courage.
Mhm.
So, talk me through the part where you also felt called to quit your corporate job and become a life coach and podcaster full time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give some background for people listening. About 2 years ago at this point, started the podcast on top of a 9 to 5. So I was doing it on top of my job for it's like about a year and a half. So it by no means was like a black and white jump where I just like quit and started things. So I was doing the podcast on top of my job in accounting. I worked at PwC and then a company called Millennium, which was a hedge fund. And the reason I started the podcast was because I didn't really feel passionate about the work I was doing. I think it's a little
Sure.
hard to feel passionate about
Mhm.
accounting
Right.
unless you're really wired for accounting, which I think is so cool. Wasn't for me. So I really was just craving, doing something I really cared about and felt connected to outside of work. So I started writing in a blog and that evolved into the podcast. And it got to a point where I a couple things were happening. First, I was burning myself out a little bit because I started to do 2 episodes a week. I really wanted to up level. I'm very serious about the podcast and growing fulfilled. It brings me a lot of joy. And I didn't want my job to keep me from going for it and from the consistency that I wanted to be producing it at. So I was doing 2 episodes a week on top of teaching yoga, on top of my 9 to 5 at a hedge fund, which was almost every day in person. All that to say, this was last year. It was burning me out pretty quickly. And I realized it was time for a change. Last year as well, behind the scenes of all that, I started to get certified as a life coach because I took a step back and I was like, okay, you can't force a podcast growth. You can't even force growth of anything really. And I didn't want to put pressure to like monetize the podcast to the point that I needed it to so quickly. So I was like, okay, how can I grow fulfilled in a way that feels aligned, that I'm passionate about, that is beyond just the podcast, more of like a business to really connect with people. And life coaching felt like a really natural evolution. I was like, okay, I'm essentially like coaching on the podcast episodes, and I love connecting with people. I also teach yoga. So it just felt like a great way to help people in more of a one on one capacity to grow fulfilled. So before I made the decision to leave my job, I already had the podcast and life coaching like in a pretty good place. Like the podcast was, I was consistently producing for the podcast, and I was starting to already reach out to potential clients as a certified life coach. So
Mhm.
it was, not like an abrupt thing where I didn't really have a plan. I found a subletter for my apartment. I moved home to Chicago for a couple months this summer. So I had a couple months where I didn't have to pay rent to really transition as I grew things. And I just got to a point in my job where the environment was just really tough for me to be around every day as I felt so passionate and connected to what I was really doing outside of my job.
Mhm.
And that's really just like a lot of background and information. But really, the point where I couldn't really go back was when I was on a walk, like at lunch, and I was just like feeling really heavy. Like I was just not really in a good emotional place because of all of this. Again, I was like a bit burning myself out. And I really just started to think about this one truth that, like, okay, I'm in this job to pay the bills, right? To make money to fund a life that brings me joy and makes me happy. And then I took a step back and I was like, I am not happy in my life right now. So therefore, why am I feeling so tied to this job and stuck here? What am I so afraid of to take step like why
Mhm.
am I so afraid of change? And I couldn't really unsee that truth that like, you know, a job at the end of the day for a lot of us is a vehicle to live a life that we love. But if we're not living a life that we love, it really caused me to question things. So that's what really fueled my decision to start to take steps. And now here I am in Austin doing life coaching and podcasting.
How fun. Well, thank you for sharing that. And you have hit a few really key, beautiful points. One is that it took time and you had the reflection of what do I want my life to look like? A lot of people I see, and I remember being in this position myself. They're in their job and it's like, oh, my job's hard. My job's bringing me down. My job doesn't bring me joy. And then so they want to escape that.
Mm,
And they don't have I love how you said that you can't force growth.
hmm
Amen. And so when we think about like listening to the nudges, I do believe I too have plans. Like I intuitively listen to the plans and it usually slows me down and removes everything but like two things from my to-do list.
hmm
But how was that process for you when you began working with clients? Because what I see a lot of people who want to make the transition, they miss this part that you need to be able to, have clients from the wild
hmm
and people who continually work with you that helps nurture your growth and your business. So talk to me a little bit about what it was like because our business never stops growing. And I'm not talking about in like a revenue perspective, like we're just constantly evolving. So when you say you can't force growth, yet you had a plan, what did that look like in your first couple of months working for yourself and being on your own? I think people have this idea of, oh, I'm gonna wake up, with the birds flying around my head and, stretch in my morning glow, and I'm gonna do all these
hmm
beautiful things, and it's gonna be a relaxing, perfect day. And because I'm following my path in my spiritual work, it's just gonna all show up for me and come to me.
hmm Which would be nice, right?
That'd be great. That would be great.
Which would be really nice. Unfortunately, I've realized that's not the case.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's a great question. I A couple things are coming to mind. One, I was staying very open as to what my plan and path was going to look like. Like I didn't just say like, okay, I'm going to have my first, you know, 10 clients by the end of summer and then everything's going to be willy-nilly and great. Like most coaches I'm realizing like struggle their first year to get any clients at all, right? It's difficult to build that trust with people. And I realized that, it's not like you can just reach out to people and be like, hey, it seems like you need a life coach, you should work with
Right.
me. It's like it's a trust, right? It's a relationship. It's really important work. And people need to be really ready and open for this kind of work
Hmm.
as in the work that we do. I definitely worked really hard in like that summer for those 3 months when I was living home before I moved here because I had all the time and capacity to do so. And I was putting myself out there in a lot of ways that felt uncomfortable a little bit, honestly. Like it was really ripping a lot of band-aids of me reaching out to even like family and friends and being like, hey, would you be open to hopping in a call to do like even write me
Hmm.
a testimonial or something? Like when you start something, it it's like you really start from ground zero. Like whether it be starting a podcast or starting a business, you have to start somewhere. And maybe that's reaching out to friends and family. Maybe it's like creating a social media and putting yourself out there in new ways. And it takes a while to gain momentum and to even figure out like what it is that you're doing and gain clarity on like the path forward.
Hmm.
So I was working out a lot of kinks last summer. I was putting myself out there in a lot of ways, reaching out to just a lot of different people to just say, like, hey, I'm offering this now, on top of the podcast. Like, this is what I'm doing. And through putting myself out there in all these ways, I did end up attracting like a pretty decent client base, which I feel really, really grateful for. So by the time I moved here, I was in a good flow with coaching on top of the podcast. But going back to the idea of staying open, I moved to Austin being like, I very well might have to just get a third side job, on top of teaching yoga, on top of all this. Like, I'm passionate about making this work, but I
Yeah.
also know and trust that, it's going to unfold in the timeline it's meant to if I keep taking action and putting myself out there. And I don't want to just like be stressed and feel like I, am financially strapped or anything. And a sacrifice, or not a sacrifice, like an option that I was very open to was like, finding out a way to monetize on the side, doing something else as I grow this thing that I'm really excited about. And fortunately, I didn't end up feeling the need to do that because of how things unfolded last summer. But I didn't have expectations and I went in really not knowing exactly how it was going to unfold, but continued to put myself out there regardless. And I think when it comes to really starting anything, like there's a lot of fear and a lot of doubt and a lot of ways you have to put yourself out there in new ways. And that can feel really scary and uncomfortable. And I do think there is like a really great silver lining to starting something while you have a 9 to 5 and while you have a job because it takes away that pressure to monetize, right? Like you can work out the kinks while having a stable paycheck. And so
Exactly.
that's something that I share with a lot of my clients. Like it is a blessing to do something on the side because it remains a passion, right? It remains something that you don't have to feel like you have to put so much pressure on to be something by a certain deadline.
Yeah. You just dropped so many wonderful gems there. And what everything you shared, I'm like, gosh, these are universal truths. And we're a highly online society. I think things are kind of shifting to more of the in-person scene now, which is really
Mm,
nice.
yeah.
And when you said a lot of people struggle in their first year, when I worked in tech and I was growing like new books of business or even nurturing existing ones, it always took about a year to get things up and going. And whenever I pivot in my business, I'm like, okay, there's going to be some warmth here, but I've got to remember like I've got to put in the extra effort right now. And I loved what you said about being open because I see people, I'm going to say women because I'm a woman, really, there's a lot of pressure on ourselves that we put to hit goals, to achieve certain things. So, especially if we are the person in the family that's kind of going left when everybody else has gone right,
Mm,
you're like, oh, I'm going to get into, spiritual coaching, life coaching, guidance, whatever. I think even more so because I know it's going to be hitting the mainstream more, but that's still something that's being massaged a bit. And really, there's these expectations of, you said it so beautifully. You're starting from ground zero,
hmm.
and there is doubt and there's challenges, and you have to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Have to put yourself out there. And the other thing you shared is you were putting yourself out there and then you did build your client base.
Hmm.
And this is the part that maybe it's because I'm in, to me, I'm basically like a spiritual life coach, but this is the part I think people feel kind of funny about. It's like, oh, I'm doing this work, I'm showing up, therefore it should just roll in, which we already highlighted. So
Mm.
tell me what that process was like for you, or if there's anything you want to add on to what I just commented on. What was that process like for you in bringing people on board for your services? How did you extend the offer to them? Where did you know to reach out to your community? Did you get, input from your podcast? How did that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I last summer was definitely just leaning into social media a lot because fortunately with the podcast, I was already building a social media to use as a vehicle to get the podcast out there. So that's another reason why starting the life coaching was going to be slightly more seamless, right? Because I had that platform I was already building and growing. So that was really the main way that I got a client base last summer. However, I noticed this pattern from going from like kind of grinding in New York with the 9 to 5 and the podcast to growing the business in the summer. I was like really pushing things and still like working really hard and like really pushing myself. And I was starting to like notice those burnout tendencies arise a little bit. I'm like, I said as I was growing the business this summer and growing this life coaching practice and making my own thing a reality that I would also rest. And I really am not really resting and listening to that. And so I noticed I was pushing myself and trying to force things and make things happen to an extent. And I've really shifted since then. So I ended up going and spending a month in Bali. I was seeing clients from there, and I'm able to work from anywhere now. So I made it work to continue coaching while just doing some travel before I moved here to Austin. And during that time, I leaned a lot into meditation and stillness and slow down and really tuned back into the theme of trust and openness, but not to an extent, like you said, where I just like stopped doing anything and just expected things to like come naturally. But I also, since I've started working with my own coach, because I think it's important to always receive guidance as you're giving guidance.
Same.
And I've shifted my approach to what I was doing last summer. And now as I grow my business, like I'm less focused on like, I need a certain number of clients and I need to just like constantly be DMing and outreaching people. Like I'm still putting myself out there, but not so much from a place of like, I hate to say the word desperation, but desperation, right? Like I was like wanting my first clients last summer because I'm like, I don't want to go back to a 9 to 5, right? It was kind of like that push
Yeah.
from fear. But now I'm really always practicing, right? Practicing embodying this pull from like, I'm going to embody the person that I know will attract the right people while I keep putting myself out there. But I'm also putting myself out there in a lot of in person ways now, right? Like I'm always opening up the conversation to my yoga students when I'm teaching yoga. I always go to work in coffee shops in the morning when I write, before or after coaching calls. And it's amazing how many people I've met in person here who are interested in coaching. And I'm putting myself out there in new ways to embody this energy and the life that I want to be living without just, you know, forcing DMs on social media and just putting out a ton of content online. I'm finding more of that balance of like, yes, I'm taking steps, but in a way that feels more aligned, in a way that I'm embodying. And to me, that's how I'm really leaning into trust, because I'm trusting that that aligned action and embodiment will lead me to
Yeah.
grow the business in the way that I really want to and the clients I really want to attract, instead of the ones that I maybe was, like having tunnel vision on, or like, okay, I'm going to get clients and it's going to be through Instagram DMs. Like, no, it might be a person I meet in a coffee shop, and it might be a yoga student that comes to class today. Who knows?
I love that. I'm smiling because I wrote down embodiment
Ah,
because I was like, I can see that's one of the things I've always appreciated about you is that you are, what you say and what you put out there online is who you are behind the
mm,
scenes from what I've gotten to know. And so, and then you
thank you.
started talking about embodiment. I also think it's good to recognize, you mentioned that you were like DMing from this place of like, we could say making it happen or fear. And I do think that if you're in business, you have to know that sales cycle. You have to know how it is that people can know about your work and how they come to you. And you mentioned that that was one way, and I've done that. I've done reach out myself, and it actually works really well when done intentionally and done genuinely. And I was actually talking to someone about that this morning because she was blasting uh, texts and DMs. And I said, well, why don't you lean into your light, your intuition, and just feel
Mm,
into who wants, who should you be reaching out to and how does it feel to connect with them? So, and I agree too, it's that point of how might I meet someone? It could be in any way, shape, or form. And I think having that openness too, that's what this is about, especially because when we realize this work is moving through us and it's not just about these dreams we're having that we want to live this fulfilled life. It's also that this work is meant to help support other people, and that's
mhm.
the beauty of all of this. So you talked about rest, and the other thing I want to highlight to me when you say embodiment and living that life now, I have to mention, folks, like this is what I don't care for this term manifestation is. I like to call it creation because that's what we're doing. We're
Mm,
creating our life. But it's being that now. It's feeling it now. Our
mm,
body is so wired to operate from where we were 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago. And so, quote unquote manifestation is what you just said. You're like, I'm embodying this now. I'm meditating now. I'm being it now. And that's so beautiful. That was such a great example. So thank you for that.
yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about rest. What's that been like for you? How's it evolved? What are some of the benefits you've noticed when you rest?
Yeah. Before I dive into rest, I just like want to share this one thing, and
Please.
is our energy like really carries, right? Like, and I know that that's such a truth that you believe too, but I have seen it and felt it so much in my life recently. And to me, that's what embodiment means, whether it be a video I'm posting, whether it be a podcast I'm recording, whether it be how I show up in my coaching calls, teaching yoga, talking to a stranger in a coffee shop, anything. If I'm showing up with positive, high frequency aligned energy, it entirely transforms the interaction. And I think I know it truly carries. And I think the difference of how I was handling things last year, first half of last year, versus how I've really shifted recently in this last year in my life is I'm focused so much more on the energy I'm showing up with instead of the end goal. And
Good.
It's allowed not only my business and how I show up as a coach, but my life to really just attract and unfold in just so much more of a natural way. And more importantly, it's allowed me to enjoy my life so much more, not feel like I need to force certain things and just maintain this. Like the one thing in our control is how we show up, right? And if we're showing up with positive energy, we can trust that we are being guided towards the right direction with aligned action, right? I always want to highlight it doesn't mean not doing anything, but I think it really starts with our energy. And I've noticed with all these changes in my life and all these ways I'm putting myself out there, I need to lead with that energy. And it's opened a lot of doors for me.
I've made a note that we're going on a bit of a tangent here, but what you said there about that plus aligned action is so powerful. And let's talk about aligned action for a moment because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I think people are waiting for a time where things feel really good.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like, oh, aligned action is going to feel smooth and euphoric and easy. And I would love to hear what your experience has been with what taking aligned action actually feels like for you.
Mm, I love this topic. I mean, that is what it sounds like, right? Like aligned action
Totally.
means like it's
Totally.
so easy, we're always in flow. I did a whole episode on this actually. I actually believe that we can get clear on what feels aligned by listening to what feels misaligned. And I think that misalignments always often guiding us towards something that feels more aligned. Like I think often our intuition is speaking to us in a way that's like kind of telling us like that doesn't feel right. And if we listen to what feels misaligned, it can guide us towards that alignment. And a way that I've been able to lean into aligned action more is just listening to my body because it does feel good and in flow when something feels aligned, and it does feel off when something is misaligned. And that can be with because of the energy I'm showing up with too, right? But like I can feel if something feels aligned because I'm really present for it and I'm not feeling any resistance towards it. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like to be honest, last summer when I was maybe doing something similar to what your client is doing, like I was sending out a lot of DMs to for outreach. It felt very misaligned. I hated it and it felt forced and I felt a lot of resistance towards it. And I was also like, that's not how I want to grow this and not how I want to be showing up. I
Mhm.
was working with a business coach at the time and he was like saying, that's what you got to do.
The method, yeah.
And it's I was confused because I was like an early on entrepreneur and I was like, okay, this business coach is telling me to do it this way. But within my intuition's telling me this is not how I want to reach people and this feels misaligned.
Yeah.
And since I've shifted and now just focus on connecting with people deeply, whether it be in person or whether it be genuinely through social media, it feels so much more aligned and it's how I really want to be showing up. And so I think aligned action really is bringing us closer to the person we want to be embodying, whereas misaligned action might be taking us further away from that person we want to be embodying. Because again, it all comes back to who we're embodying and the energy we're showing up with. And that aligned action is just either bringing us closer or further away.
Yeah. It's going to be so interesting how the business world evolves. And what I love is that people are making it evolve. People
Mm,
are saying we don't respond to, it doesn't matter. They not even the DM piece, but you know, as a collective, we're choosing how we respond to businesses and actions around that. And I'm excited for how this is gonna, I think it's gonna trigger a lot more deeper connection, authenticity. So I love
mm.
that. So rest, rest, rest,
Yes.
rest.
Sorry, I know I initiated
Oh,
that tangent,
no, no,
but
no, it's
I
great.
also love this topic.
Yeah, no, it's great.
So, rest can feel difficult, I think, for a lot of us because we're in this hustle culture, right? We have this productivity guilt, like when we do rest or step away from doing things, it's that narrative telling us we should be doing more, right? And I actually did an episode just this week on this as well. But one way I've really allowed myself to break free from that productivity guilt is to redefine what quote work means to me. And especially since I've left the 9 to 5 and now am creating my own schedule and am my own boss in all these ways, right? I have to get clear on, like, I have to find balance, right? And it felt difficult to just find balance by just like setting these strict rules and telling myself when I had to step away because I still noticed that guilt arise. Like, I can be very hard on myself. I'm very type A and go getter. And I've been on that corporate hamster wheel for a while now in New York City, that this guilt when I slowed down was still there. And so, one helpful way I've been able to step away from that guilt and invite rest without guilt is reminding myself, like, my morning meditation's equally as important as the client call that follows. Or this afternoon walk to fill my cup is just as important as the podcast episode I need to get out today. Or, like that coffee with a friend to truly connect is
Hmm.
just as important as that email I need to send. I think we have such tunnel vision on what quote productivity and work means that we see rest and, filling our cup is almost like things that we don't maybe necessarily need or things that we have to like quote step away for and maybe are unproductive or wasting time. But
Yeah.
I now see it as so the opposite. Like, I sit to meditate for over an hour every morning now because it fills my cup in such an important way for how I want to show up. And yes, I have to wake up at like 5:30 to do that, but to me it's worth
Mhm.
it because I
Same.
see that as like this is the work. This is how I want to show up. And you know, like last year I would see like getting coffee with a friend or socializing or something like that is like, stepping away from the productivity. But now I see it as like, this is a really important part of the work too, because we need to fill our social battery and social cup.
Yeah.
And so for me, redefining what work means has been really helpful, especially in this entrepreneurial chapter of my life, because the work isn't just behind the screen. We have so many needs that go beyond just making money, right? We're spiritual beings. We need to connect with people. We need rest. Like, sleep is work. That is the work.
Hmm.
And so that has really helped me incorporate rest and slow down without that guilt, which is, I think, which is what I've seen is the thing that gets in the way with most of my clients, let's say, or with most of us, I think, in our society.
Yeah, I agree. It's been one of the pieces I witness in my life is, you mentioned that like getting the cup of coffee and connecting, it's work. It's not the literal work. But what I see clients, like if I were to say, where are our boulders? Like where are we encapsulated in ice boulders, just where people can't move? And the concept of rest is one of the biggest ones.
Mm,
And so when I'm guiding clients, I'll tell them, I want you to rest or play or pleasure and notice what happens as a result.
mm,
And it's people can't, and I know this feeling so well. They can't even get to a point where they can enjoy what it is that they're doing because
mm-hmm.
they're thinking about the other things or they're doing the other things. I every once in a while I'll feel called to have like a day in bed to just sort of like do whatever I want to do. It usually means I stay in my jammies or I do my day jammies and just don't really get ready for the day, just kind of really just relax. And when my body calls for those, it's not from a place of burnout, it's from a place of it's a calling. And I
Yeah.
love those days. And it's like the gates open, the floodgates open. I feel good and relaxed. I get clarity on things. It's such a beautiful time. Yet if I think about this, I'm like, if I were to tell someone I was in bed all day, they'd ask me if I was okay. And they'd wonder if something was wrong. And I'm like, that's so backwards. It's so backwards because
Mm-hmm.
we truly don't understand the value of tending to our lives
Hmm.
in such a, it's, I think many other cultures do get it, ours doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because our culture has that tunnel vision on the traditional and conventional sense of work, right? And it's like that needs to be the forefront. But that's why I've at least found it helpful to expand that definition to include all these other things that we need, because
Yeah.
I see it as equally as important work, right? Like you don't feel guilty when you spend that day in bed because you understand that that is truly important to fill your cup, to show up as to show up even better in when you do go back to that conventional work, right? And I think another big key here is just self-love and how we talk to ourselves. Like I think if I think about the reason I felt so guilty slowing down for so long, and why I hear a lot of my clients feel guilty slowing down, is because that narrative that's going on in their mind. So I'll ask them, like, when you feel that guilt arise, what's the voice telling you? What's the narrative? And it's
Mhm.
often you should be doing more, right? Like you shouldn't be resting right now. It's like shouldn't keep going. It's we talk to ourselves without realizing it in this way that's not loving. And shifting that narrative and treating ourselves with love is also the unlock to rest without guilt and to actually listen to our body without shame, without judgment, and to give ourselves permission to actually listen to what we need. And so I think it also starts with self love and how we talk to ourselves.
I agree. It's such an interesting topic too. You mentioned about how we talk to ourselves because the other pieces, I cannot say how many times someone will get sick or be tired and they push through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be the first person to raise my hand to say that's how I lived the first 40 years of my life.
Uh-huh.
So it's one of those things we don't want to wait until it's too late until we have to. That's the other thing that's interesting right now about our culture. It's like if you don't drink, you have to have a reason right now, beyond just the fact that it like makes you tired and doesn't make you feel good. And then the other piece is why is it we have to have an excuse? Like say someone says that they're ill with a disease or something worse, then it's okay to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like why is this not more of a sustainable piece of who we are? And I will add one other thing. When clients really get into alignment, the play and the rest and the pleasure comes naturally. And it's that I always joke I want to get this on a t-shirt. I can't believe it gets to be this good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like how heavy are our minds treating us on it, to your point, the self-talk that people feel that it's like they can't play, they can't create, they can't rest, they can't do these things, they can't build the life that makes them feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
So as a life coach, what are some of the things you're seeing right now? What are people highlighting? What are they coming to you for? Where do you find like the crux of the work really bends?
That's such a good question. Such a difficult question to answer because every client's so different. And the work I do with each client is so personalized to like what they need and what they're navigating. And that's also what I love about it. But the busyness is definitely one big thing, right? Like there's no time to incorporate things that they love. And it's maybe the guilt of slowing down. Like that's definitely a huge thing. But the crazy thing is, before I get into the other problems, is like we're the only ones preventing ourselves from it getting that good, like you
Yeah.
said, right? Like when you realize that like you were the only one getting in your own way, it unlocks endless possibilities and opportunities. But sometimes these beliefs and narratives feel so powerful, and the habitual patterns we've been caught in for so long feel just so normal, and the
Mhm.
fear based way of living that we don't see any other way. But
Right.
the truth is, with all of us, all my clients, just as human beings, like we're the only ones getting in our own way. It's not the job, it's not the busyness, it's not any of it. It's us and us choosing differently. So there's the productivity guilt, the busyness. There's a big one is people not knowing what they love and what lights them up. Like
Big time, big
with
time.
with the busyness, it's like when have we ever taken time to really get to know ourselves? Maybe we're just ingrained in the friend group or the relationship or, molded from school or our career that we've just become this person that society's externally molded us into. And so with a lot of my clients, I've noticed this reality that so many of us don't know who we are. And that's why the whole first pillar of my coaching is self discovery, because we take that time to really dive deep to understand who you are before moving forward. And that's a huge barrier that a lot of people face because if I get on a call with them, let's say, like a huge thing that comes up is like, I'm not feeling very fulfilled in my job, let's say, or like, socially, I just feel like I'm going through the motions. I just like watch Netflix at night, but like I don't really know what else to do, because we don't discover who we are in school. We learn history and science and, we've never
Yeah.
taken a class and like, but who are you and what lights you up? Maybe you were just put in sports growing up and then sent to this college to study this thing and it's all you know.
Mm-hmm.
I know I felt like that for a long time, and that's why I'm really passionate now about this work because we all deserve to know who we are and what lights us up. So that's another thing. But I would say the second biggest thing to try to generalize this, which again can feel difficult, is the limiting beliefs and fears that hold so many people back. So that's why I've made that the whole second pillar of my coaching because I paint it this way like, okay, after you get to know who you really are and what you want, you know the path ahead, right? Or at least have some clarity on that. But there's all this crap getting in the way that's like blocking the path.
100%.
Yeah. And it's like the narratives that we've absorbed our whole lives and the pressure of what everyone else is doing and the fear of if it doesn't go right and all of it. And we need to work through those limiting beliefs and fears that are getting in the way of the path if we want to feel alignment and really embody that person who confidently takes steps forward towards that aligned life and feels good and confident along the way. So, I mean, I can go on and on about what those fears are, but again, fear of failure, fear of judgment, the just like belief that you can make change. So, I hope that answers your question a little bit.
It does. It does. And then some. And I love to what you're highlighting is that it's through the process of making the choices and taking the aligned action that the confidence comes, that even
Hmm.
more of the clarity comes.
Yeah.
And it's people really become unstoppable. And then that's the next layer. It's like, so now what do you do when you realize how beautifully powerful you are with your life?
Yeah, absolutely. The door is just open naturally.
And then thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I'd love to have you back one of these days. We can talk more about how things have been shifting and evolving. So, where can people find you? How can they work with you?
Thanks so much for having me, Emily. Yeah, so if you want to check out life coaching, see what it's all about, you can find my website, explore it there. And you can book a free clarity call with me if you want to really share where you're at, and we can help bridge the gap from where you're at versus where you would love to be together. And you can also check out the podcast. It's called Fulfilled. You can find it wherever you listen on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. And I would love to see you there and hear from you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emily.
It has been so great to connect here. If this episode resonated with you, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who you want to have more of these chats with. As you move throughout your day, remember, your energy is your superpower. As you pay attention to it and trust it, you can watch your entire life begin to transform.